So thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me. I mean, the idea of this morning is to share with you, of course, the PM2 aspects in the technical support reform related projects, but also to, before we get there, to share with you, and that's starting with the next slide, what is the mission of DG reform, what is the technical support instrument, what are the technical support projects, and then we will conclude by really looking into what of aspects of PM2 we can take in our project. So with the next slide, we start with the mission of DG reform. Next slide. So first, our role is, as per mandate that we have received from the college, from the commission, to coordinate it and provide what we call tailor-made technical support to the member states in cooperation with the commission services. So there are two dimensions here. So first of all, we coordinate what technical support, the technical support that is made at the level of the commission. So lots of services are doing that work. Reference was made to DigiDigit and others. So we are coordinating with them to make sure that there's a coherent set of technical support provided to the member states. But we also do provide directly, and this is going to be development in a few minutes, through the technical support instrument. And indeed, when we do provide this technical support, we do it in cooperation with the relevant commission services. We are not leading the policy. So except for governance and public administration, for which we have the lead in the commission, all the other, in all other cases, we work with the DG. So in your case, I mean, as far as we're concerned today, would really primarily be DG Connect and DigiDigit. The support is primarily provided through the technical support instrument, which is the tool that we have. It was adopted last year. So we're now launching all our projects under that tool. I will say a bit more about that. And the goal of whatever we do is, and everything that we do, is to support the member states in your efforts, their efforts to design and implement reforms that allow for, and I use the buzzwords, resilience and recovery. So in other words, to remove, to get to the optimal stage of development, socio-economically speaking, but also to put the foundations right for these societies to be resilient, so to be able to cope with new crises, with the challenges. In this particular case, it's digital, but you know the twin priorities, digital and green. But with all other challenges, I mean, for instance, we talk about the crisis that we're facing. This is a sanitary crisis. We had the financial crisis of 2008. So there will be other crises. So the idea is to have economies that are resilient and sustainable. And then, of course, what we also want to do is to improve the quality of public services. And here we all have a fundamental role to play. With the purpose at the end of the day, again, as I said already, to go for something that is sustainable and inclusive. Now, if you go through the next slide and the one after that, so the next slide, yeah, that's now we're going to the technical support instrument. What it is, this is a program. So instrument means program that provides the foundations, the legal basis for the provision of technical support, technical expertise to the member states, but it is tailor-made. In other words, it's not like a shop. You don't go shopping and just decide what is on the shelf and you pick it up. No, I mean, really the idea is the member states have an issue, and together we try to define the issue and define how we can overcome the problems, identify how we can put in place the reforms. And here really we will never insist enough on the fact that this is to design and implement reforms. It's not to support, say, training for the sake of supporting training, but it is really to conceive reform, something that is going to change the course of the situation of history in a member state. The support is demand-driven. In other words, there's no request, then there's no project, there's no support. We're not obliging anybody. We're not telling anybody what to do. We're really here to listen, to hear what the issues are, and then see how we can best help a member state to cope with that. And it doesn't require any co-financing unlike the structural funds. Now, the technical support instrument was designed before the outbreak of the COVID-19 crisis, but we have managed to link it quite nicely to the recovery plan. So it is a self-standing tool, but what we're trying to do is really to see within the recovery plan which are those reforms that need support, and we finance again the design and implementation of the reforms that will themselves trigger the absorption of the recovery funds and or others. So basically the technical support instrument starts with the request for support from a member state. As I said, if there's no request, there's no project. What we want to do is to collaborate with the member state that has requested the reform to strengthen its capacity to undertake the reform. So the member state must have an idea of reform, and we want to make sure that they can carry out. It's not us who are going to be carrying out the reform, it is the member state. As I already said, it is tailor-made. We do have, if we take the case of artificial intelligence, of course we know that this is a worldwide challenge, but it does not apply equally to all the member states because the state of maturity is not the same in all member states on any of the topics. And what we do, we use expertise from the Commission, so our colleagues, from the national administrations. So we can have experts from one member state traveling to other member states. We use experts from international organizations and or the private sector. We have a framework contract with 7 companies, and we use the companies to run projects. You know this very well. And we also use international organization, and in particular, without being exclusive, we work with the OECD, with the Council of Europe, with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and with the World Bank. But we also happen to work with the United Nations, for instance, on anti-corruption issues or so on. What we have as a budget, we have 864 million budget for the period 21-27. So this is about 107, 110 million per year that we deploy. Of course, we involve all the 27 member states. We started really with a focus on Greece and Cyprus for historical reasons, and the tool proved really to be very helpful to support the member states' reforms, which is the reason why we now have it in 27. We cover basically all policy areas of the Commission, and we cover basically all stages of reform from design, implementation, and evaluation. Now, in the slides, if they appear, when they will appear, but you will have them after the presentation, you can see the areas that we cover are the green transition, the digital transition, so the two priorities, but also health and long-term care, competitiveness, skills, education and training, financial sector and access to finance, revenue administration and public financial management, labor markets and social protection. And I left, that's the next slide. And I left the one in the center, which is my team, governance and public administration. So these are basically the areas that we are covering through, the policy areas that we are covering through our tool. Now, if you go to the next slide, I will explain in a nutshell how it works. So the EU member state that wishes to receive technical support submits a request to the Commission, to us, DG Reform, of course, with through a digital tool. And the request has to come via a national coordinating authority. In Greece is the Secretariat-General for Coordination. And we have set the date on the 31st of October of each given year. So at the moment, we are in phase 2. Basically, we are analyzing the requests that we have received, and we are having a dialogue with the member state to assess based on the request. The request is 4 or 5 pages. It's relatively light and simple to assess the request, to understand with them what are the specific needs and what are the options to support the design and the implementation of these reforms. And then the around this time of the year, we are adopting the projects for the following year. And as of the spring of the following year, so in this case, 2022, we will be start deploying the technical support as agreed. If we go to the next slide, I have a few examples of what we do, but these are just few examples because the list is really very long. So basically, we can follow up on the country-specific recommendations and that are presented on the EU semester and other EU priorities, for instance, the DESI index or the digital scoreboard, or just name it. These reports identify a number of weaknesses or a number of issues to be addressed, and that's why we are going to address them with the first, we can address them. The second bullet indicates that we can help the member states to prepare, amend, implement, and revise where necessary the national recovery and resilience plans on the DRF. It means that we're not doing the work for the member state, but if there are some preconditions for the member state to deploy the facility, then we can help preparing these conditions. So for instance, if you want to work on digital justice, but you need to have a strategy for deploying digital justice, well, we can help with that. But then all the funds for the deployment of the digital justice will come from the RF. We also help implementing economic adjustment programs. This is, of course, the case for Greece, where we are now in a totally different dialectics from a few years ago, but we really still work along the line of the Memorandum of Agreement. Lastly, when money and resources are available, we also see whether we can afford supporting the member states to implement reforms that are undertaken at their own initiative. The first three bullet points are not necessarily a hierarchical order, but they give an indication of the first three priorities. Yes, thank you. For the next slide, indeed, what we do have experts from our teams that provide direct expertise, so our colleagues are working on the projects, but I think much more than that, not I think, it is a fact that much more than that, we work through indirect provision. It means that we work with other international organizations that may have a specific and dedicated expertise, and we work with private experts, private sector experts through specific contracts. As I said, we have a framework contract with 6 or 7 companies. This is the order of magnitude, and every time we have a new project, we go back to these companies to get a direct offer. And lastly, we work with member states experts through what we call the TAEX. Basically, we have, say, an Estonian expert on digital that has a bit of spare time. We can involve this person in a project and fly them over to Greece or to any other country, of course, to work on these projects. And we, as a DG, we remain involved throughout the entire duration of the project, not only as contract manager, but also as project manager. So we're really involved in the project itself. The next slide gives you an idea of where we are, where we're going. So basically, the orange indicates the orange on the left, the number of projects that have been selected, and the green, the number of projects proposed that we have received. So you see, in the beginning was very modest. In the second year, basically we had the ratio of 1 to 4, etc. And now last year was really positively dramatic because we had 706 requests and we adopted 226 projects. So it means that the tool is being really seen as with increased interest. What we see, however, is that we're creating an increasing frustration because the means being what they are, we are relatively stable at this figure of around 200, but that's the capacity that we have. But it's good that, I mean, I take the positive side of the story is that the member states really see an interest for undertaking reforms all across the board. And indeed, when you see the cake on the right, you see that it's relatively evenly distributed between the four major thematic areas of our organization. So there's no really serious deviation from this average of about one project in 5 going to each of the team. The call, so for 2021, with a focus on the dedicated call for the recovery and the resilience plan. This is just to give you a bit of information. We have received 38 requests. We have identified 29 requests that were, this has happened before the summer. 29 requests that support the general RP implementation, and coming out of 20 member states. So basically, we have already put on the table as I said last summer, 9 million to support the deployment of the recovery and resilience plans. Now, yeah, it's also a slide after this one. The portfolio of projects. I will leave this slide for your consideration because there are quite some numbers, but it gives you a breakdown of what we have in our team. This is really our team in the area of public administration. We see that basically digital public administration is the area that is now capturing almost, I mean, we have 50 projects in that area for 15 million. So it's the second biggest area of activity for our team. The other part of activities that we do are, of course, general governance, anti-corruption, public procurement, management of EU funds, justice, human resource management, and better regulation. So these are the areas that we cover, but for you, of course, of interest is the area of digital. Now, if I move to the slides that are talking about the PM2 aspects. So here I have just a couple of slides for you. So first of all, the link between our projects and the PM2 methodology. We are getting inspiration from the PM2, PM² methodology to implement our projects through the contracts, because this methodology we cannot impose to the other international organization, but we can really offer to the we do ask the contractor to follow, and we have a few points. I would like to refer to 6 points where we think that it's giving value added. First of all, it allows us to facilitate the use of a common terminology in the organization, but also with the contractor, and it allows to define common language and processes, resulting again in a better communication. There are less misunderstanding when we use that context. PM² covers the entire cycle live from the initiation. So basically, when the member states submit their request to us and we draft the request for service, through the planning to execution, by concluding with the closure of the projects. And therefore, we have clearly established these different steps. And for each of these steps, we define the needs and we monitor implementation, and we monitor your work, and you also know where you stand and how to report. Thirdly, it describes clear governance models, again, which allows to better communicate, because here we are with you, I mean, we are with the contractor, but we are working, the two of us, for a beneficiary. And therefore, this triangulation is working better when we have a common semantics and a common understanding of the project. Next slide. The PM² allows us to describe roles and responsibility at all levels of project governance. So because it's so well structured, it allows to identify for each step who has to do what, and that includes the steering committee, which is the committee that supervises the project, what we call the business implementation groups. So this is the equivalent of what we have our working groups, etc. So basically, it is clear who has to do what. And if I refer to the previous point, how and by when and with what results. Then fifth, PM² provides for plans and roles aiming at the sustainability of the project's results, which is critical for the G reform, because basically what we want to make sure is that once we finish the project, it's not just a nice thing to have, but there's a clear path for deployment, who will have to be involved, by when and how, etc. So again, it's part of the clarity about the project and clarity about the communication. And I said it, overall, it allows to communicate clearly with the stakeholders from the beginning to the end, but also it allows to clearly communicate with the both political and the operational levels. At the operational level, it's relatively easy to talk. At the political level, sometimes it's a bit more engaging, but we think that this way of approaching the project allows us to go smoothly. I'm getting to the last slide of my presentation. How do we use examples here of PM² aspects in technical support projects? So, for instance, in the digital projects, as I already hinted at, we provide that our contractors should be compliant with PM² methodology during the implementation phase, because we think it gives value added and all the reasons that I indicate. We also had a training of our staff on the PM² methodology. So everybody knows what it is. We use it, they use it differently, but everybody knows what it is. And if we're not copy pasting all the elements, certainly the concepts are all implemented in the project, which is also the third slide, the third bullet point, sorry. We use the fundamental concepts, outputs, outcome, benefits. So we have aligned the language and the concepts here. We also, as was hinted at before, some training was provided to, in this particular case, to the Greek civil servants from the tax administration and the Minister of Digital Governance. And lastly, we see that some national administration have adopted the methodology and customized this, well, you know the terminology, the artifacts of PM² methodology for the management of projects at their level. So the training bullet number 4 was to better understand each other, but the spillover is that the Greek Minister of Digital Governance is now applying this methodology. So I stop here my presentation. I hope the sound was good enough to go through all of it, and let me know if you have questions and answers. I'd be happy to answer them.